hope you're continuing to watch us as we track all the way through to what could be potentially a landmark budget, not just for the specific announcements and pronouncements that there may be in this, tax proposals and the like, but also what this specific budget is going to be telling us about the economic philosophy of the Modi-Jaitley combine. And the Modi government's first budget, slightly panned, people said there's not much in it. Now let's see what actually is going to be happening this time around, because expectations are running high, and that perhaps is the biggest problem that Arun Jaitley is going to face. Expectations are really, really high, no matter what he says and does. Well, we have a great panel to take us through all the way through till the budget speech. Prashant's, of course, still here with us, as is Mr. Unni Krishnan, MD and CEO of Thermax. We have Rahul Bhasin joining us now, managing partner at Bearings Private Equity Partners. Great to have you with us. Mr. P.B. Bhatt, also former Revenue Secretary, will tell us just where the money is going to come from to pay for all this infrastructure spending that we are no doubt going to be seeing. We also have Madan Sabna is still with us, Chief Economist at Care Ratings. We have Bobby Parikh, Chief Mentor and Partner at BMR. Sanjeev Aga is also joining us, who can tell us just what he makes of what the key expectations are. Can I just start with you, Rahul? You know, the railway budget, many people thought that it sometimes gives you an indication as to which way the government is thinking. What's the key points to take away? One of the things that we took away from the railway budget is a certain amount of thrust on public investment in infrastructure. Government, the private sector has to leverage, let the public sector do it. But otherwise, no big bang direct reforms. I know you, for example, were expecting something on fares and freight balancing.
So, when the government has announced focus on manufacture and make in India, we expect that policy action will be consistent with that. And one of the issues that we faced...
We are having trouble in hearing you. I think that mic may have fallen off. So, well, okay, while we get that mic to you. Yeah. Mr. Unni Krishnan, let me get you in on the key signals that you took from the real budget.
Yeah. First of all, populism is away. That's a single largest message that I would take from the budget, because normally a minister would want to announce many things. Whereas here there are no new trains announced, no new projects. It's something like a tottering Indian railway, how he is going to make it functional and going to make it more efficient.
But the signals from that for this budget?
It's almost the same. At least I'm taking that way, that if the Prime Minister had a say in the budget making in the final part of it, I'm sure he won't be very populistic, he'll be very realistic. It's my understanding.
What you said is interesting, because higher public spending, right? Yeah. And the point is the centre's budget is contributing more to the railways. But the other point is, railways is a pet project of Mr. Modi, right? He's spoken openly about it as to how...
And railway-led, if you have to put public spending into infrastructure, railways might be a good way to start. So I have to come to you, because as former Revenue Secretary, you probably know where the money is going to come from, right? And that's what, at the end of the day, every time there's a budget, fundamentally all the people who are watching this are saying...
Are we looking at the real budget, or are we looking at the union budget?
Well, union budget.
Well, I frankly believe a lot of... you won't see a big bang budget in anything, but you'll see a lot of directional changes, setting the goals for the future. I mean, GST itself is a big bang in a sense. And the Finance Commission has laid the path for 5 years, create a corpus, fund the states in a receding pattern, 3 years full differential of whatever they have in terms of lesser revenues, which I don't expect if GST is properly administered, and then bringing it down. So you will see a lot of directional changes there. They've been talking of
the setting of the stage thing. Didn't that happen in his last budget? You know,
not for GST.
Month after.
Not for GST.
Not the GST, but the overall setting of the stage and the stuff that happened last time around. So people this time are expecting, now come on, give us something to chew on.
Yeah, but if you get a GST rate of 27%, you're not chewing anything. Yeah. So the question is how properly you set that rate, because you've now taken the decision that you'll make good the differential. So I've always believed tax rates can go up. Bringing them down is very difficult, politically. Yeah. So if you start at 27, bringing it down, the states will love to get in 27%. But Bringing it down to 16, 17 may not be so easy. So I expect something to come in that direction. I therefore expect compliance by traders, by industry, to remove the 3 sets of accounts that go, one to the income tax, one to the commercial taxes, and one to the central excise. So something has to happen on that. That will lead to a lot of, leakages getting plugged, and therefore revenues going up. I expect some money to come in from rationalization of subsidies, not removal. The leakages will definitely happen.
JAM number scheme in particular.
Well, JAM is the new coinage one sees, but if you look at fertilizer subsidy and you do direct transfers, a lot of leakage will go out of the system. And that's money which comes in as resource. So there should be, and frankly I think we bottomed out in terms of low growth. While it may have been 1.1 to 1.3% by end of December, slowly I think there are shoots of change.
Okay, Bobby, let me throw that to you on the question of taxation. Taxes going up, down, specifically, I'm sure you can predict for us exactly what our tax levels are going to be by the end of the day.
I think clearly I would expect that the budget will project an increase in tax revenues, and we have to see what that level is going to be. Last year was budgeted to grow at 12 or 13%. It came in at 6 or 7, or likely to come in at 6 or 7%, and so the general sense is that the estimates of where the revenue growth might go next year seem to be ranging quite broadly between some estimates which are seen at 10% to some being far more aggressive. As to whether the rates actually change, I don't have so much hope that the rates will change. There might be some adjustments to the in personal taxation to what might be exempt, or some relief in the deductions that are available for provident fund contributions and interest on housing loans and things like that, medical reimbursements. But fundamentally, I don't feel optimistic that or I don't get the sense that there will be a reduction in corporate tax rates, for instance. What we could, however, see is some moderation of MAT or dividend distribution tax, particularly on sectors that the government wants to particularly focus on, such as special economic zones or infrastructure projects more generally. So we might see some relief in the form of taxation or the tax incidence for these sectors, but otherwise I think headline rates I don't see much scope for those to change.
All right, fair enough. Sanjeev Aga is with us as well. Mr. Aga, you tend to look at the overall the governance structure. I think we were on with the last budget as well, and apart from the statement of accounts and the revenue and the expenditure, which we'll know in a bit, but what is your focus? 2 or 3 things that you really want out of this budget?
Prashant, there are 3 things I want, but I'll mention only one because I don't want to hog all the time. To begin with, we've got a 1 lakh crore bonanza from lower oil prices, and we also have moderate inflation. And so this is the first full year budget, and I see this not as a Jetli budget, I see it as a Modi budget. Now I would look at 6 or 7 sectors where there is enormous scope to move the needle, and I just mentioned some of them. These are roads, minerals, rail, energy, telecom, tourism, and even education, which is a social sector. So if India is to change over the next decade, you have to start attacking at least 2 or 3 of these, if not all. And I would like to see how this 1 lakh crore bonanza is leveraged. Anyone can spend it, but how do you intelligently leverage it to make an impact where it matters most? Now, you had asked a question about the rail budget, Rahul, but I just want to mention, although I have not read the fine print of the rail budget, but I see a pattern which I think has not come out. The rail minister is seeking to improve asset utilization. So whether he is increasing the speed of trains or he is monetizing land, By and large, existing assets will give greater revenue, and that is how you make your books balance by much, which is increasing the top line, and I completely agree. So I think there is deeper thought to it than we have probably realized. As you're aware, I want most of these sectors to go away from ministers and go into more advanced regulatory governance institutions. That I'm not seeing. But on railways on the whole, I'm very enthused. In telecom, I think it's a disaster. We have stepped back. There was a golden opportunity to leave everything to the telecom regulator, but we have generalists who don't understand the subject, meddling and making a mess of it. I would be watching to what happens in energy, to what happens in tourism, to what happens in education. And if I have one more minute, I'd just like to mention, I would be particularly keen to see what happens to the bottom 50% of our population in terms of access to public services.
Right.
Things like schooling, education, water and roads and power. I'm talking of access, I'm not talking of,
Mr. Aga, we'll discuss this in greater detail when we come back. Basically, you're saying that you got a lot of money saved because of lower oil prices. Let's spend it effectively. That was the message, point number one. We'll just come back. Everybody stays on. Take a quick break. We're back in exactly 2 minutes. Markets are holding strong. There's about, 30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes to go for the budget speech to start. Back in 2.
Right, so high expectations. Rahul Bhasin, is that perhaps the biggest problem that the finance minister is going to face, that with expectations running so high, very tough to actually meet them? Especially if you consider that a lot of the things that you would really like to hear in the budget are not things that are going to have an impact tomorrow or day after, but maybe also like a roadmap, like setting a 2-year, 3-year process by which we can get to that double-digit growth.
I think the expectations are impossible to meet, especially because people expect results out of them immediately. So it's not even what actions are taken. I mean, you fix any organization, and I've had some experience in doing that. You get into an organization, the fastest you can do it is at 18 to 24 months. You can fix an organization, and then you start to see the results of that taking place. For an organization the size of the government of India, to expect that it can be done in 6 months, 12 months, when we have, if you just look at the results, in 1820 we were 25% of world GDP, we are now 2.5% of world GDP, which means we've done an extraordinarily poor job of managing our economy, right? Now, to suddenly expect that we'll become world class overnight in 12 months or 18 months is, I think, being extremely unrealistic. To me, the first thing I look at when someone's fixing a thing is, has he put the right people in place? And there seems to be more than enough talent in the right direction in terms of the economy. The right goals in place, and that also seems to be quite apposite. And this Make in India, I think, is a very good first step in that direction. But if I look at the speed of execution of some of those, I think I and everybody else will always be disappointed with that. I mean, I think in the rail budget there was an opportunity to remove this cross-subsidy of freight and passenger. I think that freight, when you want to have Make in India, it should be freight which should be subsidized by passenger traffic, not the other way around. And to my mind, that's an opportunity loss. But I think Mr. Aga made the correct point that as far as increasing productivity, efficiency, efficacy of government assets, systems, processes, I think it's a very good first step, and I hope that theme continues in the overall overall union budget, because I think there's a massive opportunity there in terms of just simply improving productivity, efficiency of all our processes and reviewing them ground up. I think to some extent this transfer of resources to the states, not duplicating things. One of the things which has got missed out is even the environmental ministry has taken out a whole bunch of things which the center used to do and say, let the states handle it. Why should there be duplicity of roles here? I think that kind of action initiative, I think, is very encouraging.
Prashant, government expectations, what are the markets saying?
They want government spending and very low fiscal deficit. So both can't happen, but that's what the expectation is. But I guess that's what most people want. I mean, government should spend because the private sector isn't spending or can't spend. And but it is at the same time, it might be possible with as Mr. Unikrishnan was making the point, you got a lot of money because oil prices. Even if you, but you got to make an assumption. What is that assumption going to be for oil prices when you make budget allocations for fiscal 16? Is it going to be 60, 70? You can't keep it too low. You can't have the price right now. You should have it slightly higher, so there is some buffer if prices could go up. Nobody predicted the fall, so it would be unfair to expect that prices will stay here and make that as an assumption. So, but even if you assume 60, it is way lower than what the budget, the assumption of oil price was last year. So it might be possible to reduce, to spend some of this oil bonanza on, as Mr. Aga said, on a couple of sectors which give you the maximum bang for the buck, so to speak, and move the needle as far as growth is concerned. How much should the fiscal deficit be contracted? The aim is 4.1, 3.6, 3% by fiscal 17. If you look at the economic survey, and not that the eco survey has anything to do with the budget or there's any correlation, but Mr. Arvind Subramaniam in the eco survey has said that the pace of fiscal consolidation can be delayed a little bit. It doesn't have to. In a way, he was kind of hinting at that. Maybe Mr. Jaitley will do that. He won't go to 3.6. He'll say, okay, we'll do 4.1 has been met. Fiscal 16 will be slightly under 4, and gradually we'll get to 3%, not by fiscal 17. I think that also markets should be quite okay with. Vikram, the basic point, and the markets right now are holding out well, 60 points on the Nifty, 200 points on the Sensex. Basic point is even, and I've been asking this question to old-timers and market participants, whether this will be a turning point for the market. I mean, most people that I've spoken to, and they've said, well, no. Even if the budget weren't to live up to expectations, they're not going to change their view about.
It also depends on turning point up or turning point down.
Turning point down, because we've been going up.
You could have some people say turning point in the sense now we're going to see real growth and coming up in 35,000 within 2 months. I've heard some people.
No, but the point is that is fine. People are positioned for that because they've got their money in the market. The point is, if it disappoints, that will be the surprise. That will be the impulse for the market to actually head lower. And the answer to that, mostly meaningful correction, if the budget doesn't live up to expectations, is no, that won't happen.
Mr. Unikrishnan, just wanted to ask you now from industry's point of view, and let's look at infrastructure in particular. Yeah. We all know that fixing infrastructure is perhaps the single most important thing that we have to do. Now, somehow we've got into a situation where for the entire private sector, there is some sort of a debt crisis there. Most of the infrastructure companies very over-leveraged. Yeah. And so this entire concept of, yes, we will have PPP, and that's where we're going to get this $500, $600, $700 billion to fix Indian infrastructure. That's where it's going to come from. Doesn't seem that likely, not from the private sector right now. What can be done to fix this? A, public sector spending, I guess, is one of the directions. B, what can the government do and perhaps try and do in this budget to actually get that deleveraging process accelerated?
First of all, the concept of PPP in the country is highly over-exaggerated, because the PPP is nothing but a public-private participation. The way it is considered and construed by the entire country and the government is a privatization of the public services. So that is where the correction has got to happen. You cannot have a death warrant signature being taken from a partner to say that once you've taken the agreement, then, I mean, we have cases of a couple of companies who are currently suffering losses on account of the fact that they have signed on a piece of paper. We have studies available from Australian University, which is specializing in PPP, that more than 50% of any and every PPP contract signed in any part of the developing world has got renegotiated in the first 5 years. So we have to have the kind of a provision made for correction of that if you want a private to be coming into creating infrastructure for the country. That's the first correction needed. Next is government, being the ideal provider for this facility, should be creating SPVs for each one of them. Get all the land acquired, all the clearances done, and then have a private party invited to come in. And then the entire management of the project and the running of the project should be handed over to them.
But on that one, let me just get in Chandrajit Banerjee, who's Director General of CII. Mr. Banerjee, thanks for joining us. Yes. Let me get your overall expectation first, because obviously this is being viewed as a potentially landmark budget. Maybe unfair to keep viewing it like that, but what would be the key 3 or 4 things you'll be looking for today? Mr. Banerjee, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I was just asking you, what are the key 3 or 4 things you're looking for today?
Oh, actually, I didn't hear that. Key 3 or 4 things, as you saw in the economic survey, I think it clearly says that we are in the cusp of recovery. And I think what's going to be very important is to see how you can really get demand back, both the consumption demand and the investment demand. And that's going to be very critical. And for that, one would really need to see how you are giving more money in the hands of for consumption demand to go up. Number 2, I think investment demand, there is where you need to have that's going to be actually a big ticket issue that one wants to see. Over 2 lakh crores actually held up in the public sector, which is available for investment. If you kickstart that, if you are really able to bring that in, we would definitely see the private sector also following. So I think that's going to be a very key area that one would like to see in the budget. The other one is on the taxation side. I think the government has been talking about a predictable tax structure, more predictability coming in, more transparency coming in. Of course, we need more widening of the tax net, but that's going to be key. And the movement towards GST, at least an announcement that 1st April 2016 is going to be the date and a roadmap towards it. And again, there we have over 4 lakh crores of money stuck up into disputes. That needs to be that's something that one would need to see really coming back into the system. And so dispute resolution mechanism in the tax side is something that one would really expect to see. So there is a lot of expectation. One can go on, but let me stop there.
Let me come to a couple of specific things taking up from what you said. Mr. Banerjee, as you know, for the last 3 or 4 years, industry has been particularly concerned about how the government has actually, when the regulators, whether it's the tax authorities, taking a more adversarial stance. And we've had this government saying, no, we are not going to do that anymore. So would you like to see specific announcements on that in this budget? I mean, saying that they're doing something specific about retrospective tax is one thing, but would you like to see some concrete steps being said so that government can be assured of a slightly more benign tax and regulatory environment with fewer flip-flops?
That's the point that I was also mentioning. It's just not only going to be a tax transparency or a tax a roadmap in terms of predictability of tax, but also a sort of a tax administration regime which is going to be a strong signal. But that only a signal can come from the budget. A lot needs to be done outside of the budget in looking at what you are really hinting at, a tax terrorism sort of a structure and an administrative structure which would make the taxation administration much more benign, which is going to be an important signal which can come into the budget. But much of that needs to be also done outside the budget framework.
The other big issue, of course, that many in industry have been grappling with, if we have to have an investment-led surge and boom, many private companies say we are just too leveraged, and many of them have been looking for something, perhaps some innovative structure that can come out to get us out of this cycle we seem locked up into. Projects that are just held up for various reasons, then a debt burden mounting. If we can somehow get that going and not sorted out, then perhaps it'll help a lot.
Yeah, so that's a very important point, and actually that's where we are trying to look at, today contractors are unable to take up projects which have even been cleared because they are over leveraged and they don't have the money to start the system. And there needs to be pooling in a lot of money into the on the infrastructure area. So one is looking at an institutional framework which can be actually get created within the budget. Within the budget is something outside, a new body which would really look at infrastructure funding, sovereign funding coming into it. A lot of a different infrastructure funding body which would be able to attract a large number of both FDI, pension funds, wealth funds, sovereign funds, and that could be something very important in looking at kickstarting a lot of infrastructure companies to pick up. So that's going to be important. So, and the other important point is a reverse BOT type of a situation. So we need to have sovereign clearances and government picking up up, government building with clearances in advance, and the private sector really coming into an operation and maintenance, and they find out a mechanism, then obviously they come back again to invest more into infrastructure. So I think there has to be a very different approach given to this entire issue of letting infrastructure kick off, which will of course trigger off other areas within the economy.
All right, Mr. Banerjee, well, thanks so much for joining us with that perspective. We'll see how much of that will actually be addressed by the government, by the finance minister when he speaks in about 10-15 minutes or so. Mr. Bhasin, can I just get you, let's say you are somebody who's now structuring this, and you had to start, you're, as a private equity player, you come into all of these companies and you had to restructure it, and you are Arun Jaitley right now. How could it be done? Is it a sovereign fund that can be created, borrow money from abroad?
Public sector?
The entire private sector bottleneck that we seem to be having. So many projects that are held up, not being able to get financing, debt burdens mounting, public sector banks now getting slightly concerned. This is one of the big issues. And if you can't fix this, private investment in infrastructure is always going to be a problem.
I think I would actually put a committee, and not just of bureaucrats. I would put a committee. I would put a committee of 3 people. One person from the private sector, one person from the judiciary, and one person from the public sector, who reviews every project and sees whether the delays and problems have been created by the government itself.
I'm asking you to be a dictator instead of setting up a committee. You're the boss.
You have to review every project, get into the details of it, and figure out whether it was a problem created by the government or the problem created by the private sector entity.
Okay, fine.
If it was by the private sector entity, they should be declared bankrupt, and those things are those assets should be re-auctioned. If it was done by the government and something is held up at the government's end, the government should be fined, and that entity should be compensated.
This entire PPP thing.
If it's done in a transparent manner, let me tell you one thing: if the government does it with with 2 or 3 bureaucrats or an agency within the government, it'll have no credibility at all.
So fix the responsibility and punish the person.
Punish or compensate.
Do you agree with that view?
And
there
do it
already
immediately.
some movement in this area. We've seen the ICICI Bank making a joint venture with Tata Power for taking over the assets which are currently stranded, where they have a lot of money stuck in. So banks are also being permitted by the RBI right now to convert debt into equity, but of course they may not have an ability to run. So do you have a superstructure created, like the way Rahul spoke about? Is it practical to create? It is done in countries like China when they had stranded assets available. A separate bank created for looking after that asset, and separate management created for it.
Can I come in a bit on this? Share Mr. Bhasin's anguish, but the malaise is much deeper. We've already had the first restructuring phase without bureaucrats. So let's address why that happens. And that's an overall interference, political, bureaucratic, and more importantly, industry. How do you prevent these sort of companies getting restructured again and again failing? So that's where the tension on the company, the bank's balance sheet, and the default of the company comes in. There is another issue. Vikram, if you remember last year, when we were looking at the infrastructure debt restructuring, we were all very happy when that announcement was made. But I'm afraid the initiative taken has not really taken off. Now you really need to look at ways that you extend the tenor of infrastructure loans, possibly have a penal interest which can be waived if they sustain the revised schedule. Some sort of subventions to make infrastructure companies perform.
All right, we are going to take one more very quick break, because then after that we'll go all the way through till the budget speech and beyond. So we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, I'm going to get Prashant to quickly take us through all the stocks in the entire stock market, tell us what's going up and what's going down. welcome back. Not that long to go now. In about 5-10 minutes, we will be hearing the budget speech, and actually we'll take you straight across to that. Before we do so, Nifty is at about 8,900 or thereabouts. Prashant, why don't you quickly take us through what exactly is happening at the stock market right now?
Sure, Vikram. So, 60 points, 8904, as you said, 220 points in the Sensex, 29,400. Mid-cap index is up 0.5%. Small-cap index is up 0.75%. So this is looking pretty strong. Going into the budget as well. You start to see some, but it's a speech, right? And I guess the most important stuff for the corporate sector comes right at the end of the budget in terms of taxation and things like that. So unlike the monetary policy of the RBI, where it's basically rate hike or no rate hike or cut or no cut, the market fluctuates quite a bit, very violently sometimes, right going into the event. Here, when the speech could be an hour, 2 hours. Last time it was 2 hours. So it's not that volatile. I guess it will once the speech starts and we start to get some substantive stuff. Stocks are on your screen. These are stocks, essentially, which our team identified could actually move the most based on the budget. ITC, excise, right? Would it go up? And broadly, it would also signal the government's thinking on curbing tobacco consumption. And I think there's been a fair bit of talk about that. ITC, though, gets always bought into on falls. Let's see, DLF, REITs, they can't access capital markets. REITs is an important source of potential money, which they want. L&T, it's the largest private sector infrastructure firm. And they got a finger in pretty much every subsector of the infra space, so it's the easiest way to sort of play that space. HPCL, BPCL, IOC, there's expectation that custom duty, import duty on crude oil could go up. Actually, it could be reintroduced. It was reintroduced the last time oil prices fell, which was back in 2008 or 9, and it's expected to be brought back. It's not good news for oil marketing companies. SBI, BOB, PNB, financials, public sector financials, there's always expectations of one kind or the other. So these are things which we will see. Customs duty on gold, Titan and a couple of other. Titan actually is the big one. There are others as well. The stocks are lesser traded and not that predictable, but Titan the big one. Yes, Vikram.
All right, so let's see how much of this actually comes about. Okay, with about 6-7 minutes or thereabouts to go before the speech actually starts, let me come to all of our panelists one by one and ask them that key question every budget asks us at this time. What is the one thing you would not like to hear in the budget? We've all got our wish list. What would you not like to hear? Let me start off in Mumbai. Madan Sabnavis, why don't you kick off? What is the one thing you would not like to hear in this budget? Very quickly.
No enhanced taxation anywhere, because I would say, because normally the budget doesn't give anything which is unsavory. But if you're talking in terms of something which we wouldn't like to hear is any cut in social spending, because that looks a possibility in this.
No more taxes and no cut in spending. That's the finance minister sort of by now tearing out his hair and saying, how do I manage that?
Social spending.
Okay, social spending. No cut in that. Fine. Sanjeev Aga, very quickly. What would you not like to hear?
Vikram, I would like to hear a lecture on fruitless litigation and tax terrorism without a solution. I've been waiting for a solution, and the solution or the milestones for a solution should be evident.
Okay. So what would you not like to hear?
Additional subsidies.
Additional subsidies. Restructuring of subsidies, is that something which you would be happy with? Moving away from the way it is done right now to this, direct
Making them
transfer?
efficient. Making them efficient. That lead to saving itself.
Okay, fine. Sunny Krishnan, what would you not like to hear?
Yeah, plethora and list of items which will have an allocation of starting with maybe 1 crore of rupees to 100 crores of rupees, just to make the benches thumb on that. Be very specific, the way possibly our railway minister spoke about. I'm not looking forward to smaller announcements, something chunky, bigger, which will kickstart the investment cycle.
Bobby Parikh, what would you not like to hear?
I wouldn't like to hear that we are working on GST and we are hoping to sort out all the issues and we are hoping to have it happen soon. I'd like to hear something which is far more definitive and not stuff which we've been hearing for the last many years.
Right. Rahul Basin? Not like to hear.
I wouldn't like to hear that the government is retracted on its stance on the land acquisition bill. I think it should be scrapped. I think even the government's current stance.
The ordinance should be scrapped, or the earlier bill?
The earlier bill should be scrapped. I think even the ordinance is too mild. I think that the country needs to urbanize. We've had 130 million people who've moved from rural to urban India.
We'll get you back for another debate on this, because the earlier 1896 Act was pretty awful. So we need something. You need somewhere in between.
I think that you've got to have a situation where you allow the government to pay a fair compensation, especially if you're not having somebody take over their property without their choice. I think, having a price premium is fine, but the rest of it is absurd.
Different debate, different time. Prashant, you want to chip in one thing you would not like to hear?
Only a long speech.
Long speech.
Now, having got that out of the way, one more question to all of you, just one-line answers. What would you like to see as the big headline in the papers tomorrow? The big headline in the paper tomorrow should be what? Mr. Sabnaris, why don't I start with you again?
Growth to be spurred.
Okay, a bit more detail than that. I mean, like how?
No, when I'm saying growth to be spurred, government spending on infrastructure, number one. Providing more incomes to individuals to spend more on consumption, because I think what's plaguing our economy today is low demand. So we need households to spend more, we need the government to spend more on infrastructure.
More spending on infrastructure, that's the headline you're looking for. Sanjeev Agar, tomorrow's headline, what would you like it to be?
I would like a little strategic breaking of the mold in at least one or two or three sectors.
Babi Parikh?
The mold of mindset.
I'd like to see, echo Sanjeev's point, I'd like to see something to the effect that there's the clear path to growth over the next 3 years, kind of a thing.
Okay, a minute to go. I mean, some specific thing would you like to see? Big bang, something?
Tax administration rationalized.
Tax administration rationalized.
Government announces $1 trillion worth of projects to be initiated in the next 5-year period.
$1 trillion?
Yeah. Infrastructure demand.
Actually, who knows? Something like the railway budget you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. 8.5 lakh
plan for infrastructure.
Yeah. Let me say what I mean by rationalization. Reducing arbitrary empowerment of the tax administrators, simplification of the resolution processes.
Okay, that's the big headline.
I'd like to see that accountability in the tax department, which means anyone makes any claims which the tax turn out, it should go in their performance appraisal and their promotion subsequently.
Hang on. So you're saying something very interesting, that in a sense you would like to see something being done that the people who are actually in the tax department get their rewards and their increments and their promotion, not just based on how many people they went and harassed, but on money they collect. Other specific things.
On money, claims that they made which were not subsequently overturned. Overturned means it should be negative. What they claimed and they managed to retain should be positive.
Okay, so actual disincentive in case somebody is just putting something in to go out and harass people.
People change behavior only because of incentives and disincentives, not because of speeches.
Okay, so let me throw in my tuppence on the acronym that I think perhaps is something we may end the day remembering, and that's JAM. We're getting the JAM number trinity going, replacement of subsidies as we know them with something towards direct tax transfers. How many people, is that something which you think could be feasible?
It is feasible.
This budget?
I think it's imperative.
It's going to happen.
I think it has to happen. It has to happen.
Maybe a time frame would be announced by the government when it will be totally completed. Announcement can happen right now itself.
But you're seeing movement on that even without the budget. So it should just go.
But let's see if that announcement has been. All right, I see the speakers there, and let's hope we actually do start the budget speech on time. Sometimes there are disruptions and all sorts of things. Let's just go straight across to the budget speech.
Madam Speaker, I rise to present the budget of the Union for the year 2015-16. I present this budget in an economic environment which is far more positive than in the recent past. When other countries are facing serious challenges, India is about to take off